nutrient traceability from soil to plant, plant to animal, animal to plate. That's what we're talking about, the future of food, in this episode of The Business of Agriculture. Are you looking for productive efficiencies in growing higher yielding, better performing crops? New Fields Ag provides a complete portfolio of biological products focused on you, the farmer. Visit newfieldsag.com for more information to help you farm better. Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of The Business of Agriculture. Got a great one for you today because I got two great guests. You're going to like them. I didn't think I would, but then we just did the pre-call. His name is Stephan Van Vliet. He's a professor at Utah State University. He works in metabolomics. You wonder what that is? It's about food. Basically, he's got a PhD. He's a smart dude, and he did some analysis of beef samples for my friend Kelly Garrett, GLC Beef in Northwest Iowa. You might remember Kelly. He's been on this show a number of times. He and I worked together at our other role within Extreme Ag. Well, Kelly has hundreds of cow-calf pairs. He also takes many of the calves and feeds them out and has a direct-to-consumer beef business, GLC Beef. And he's been really dialing into the future of food, food nutrients, nutrient density, and food as health. A few months ago, he was on with Carter Williams. We talked about the viability of investment pouring into this space because, let's face it, we have quantity mastered. We are really good at producing bulk amount, more gallons of milk, more pounds off the feed yard, more bushels out of the field. But what about the food? We are sick in America. We have 42% obesity rates. We have 11 to 12% of our population that is type 2 diabetes. We are not in great shape. Can we actually change the conversation about food, and can agriculture answer the call? Yes, we think we can, but let's do so with numbers. So what Kelly did was he sent beef samples to the lab at Utah State University where Dr. Stephan Van Vliet, we will not call him doctor again because he's not going to check your temperature. Stephan did these analyses and came back with some really remarkable information. So Kelly, why you set out to do it, and I want to hear what Stephan did when the meat got to his place.
We always felt that our beef tasted better than the average, and I felt that was the way that we handled the cattle. I felt that was the way that we feed the cattle, but I didn't have any metrics for that. And I know I'm biased; it's my own product, right? But I knew it was a quality product, so I just continued to try to research and learn. And then we're in the direct-to-consumer beef business, and one of your main competitions in that direct-to-consumer beef business is grass-fed. Grass-fed is a great product, but it's more expensive. And their claim to fame is that they are healthier. They're healthier on the omega-6 to 3 ratio is the one that they talk about a lot, things like that. So I started to research as to why. And then, we learn about nutrient density. Nutrient density is biodiversity plus mineral balance. Well, from what I've learned about cattle grazing and things like that, from like TJ Carter's at Biotel, and you watch and observe the cattle instinctively know what to eat. Do they want to eat grass for the protein? Do they want to eat the kales and cabbages, things like that? So grass-fed, to me, is more nutrient dense for two reasons. The grass is more nutrient dense than the corn because we need to do a better job of raising corn, and the animals can select what they want to eat. Well, now with the SAP analysis that we're using at Calibrated Agronomy, I'm raising nutrient dense corn. So we are interested to find out, where does our beef stack up against other grain-fed beef, and where does our beef stack up against grass-fed beef?
So it's a big departure from where we were historically, and I'm going back when you and I were born and before that. And I read a thing once, it was like a Kansas State or in Nebraska, somebody out in beef country, a professor said, we've spent the last 50 years trying to figure out how to put more gain on a steer or on a fat animal using corn in a feed yard. I think the next 50 years are going to be how we do so more with grass. And so that was the grass-fed people touted that and said, we got all this rangeland, we've got all this opportunity, and it's healthier, and flavor. And I kind of bought into that. But then I thought, there's the matter of timing. And particularly at a time like right now, beef herd's really low. We've got this issue of really high beef prices. We need to turn out some beef. And so I think that the right answer is feeding better and still packing pounds on, but doing it with I think this fits the future better than just the grass-fed model, I guess is what I'm saying. But then
it does.
There's always the issue of, is it actually got the right nutrient component?
It does. And, I'll let Stephan talk about our results. But yes, it does. And in a lot of ways, we have a better nutrient component.
Yeah. So is it Stephan or Stefan? I want to make sure we're doing this right.
No, well, if you say it in Dutch, it'd be Stefan, but typically in the US, people call me Stefan.
All right. I can do the Dutch thing. I mean, I'm familiar. By the way, we'll go ahead and throw it out there because I do business with the Dutch people. My tenant's a Dutch dairyman. If you don't believe in evolution, I want you to understand this. If you don't believe in evolution, if you read the thing about giraffes' necks and all that, the Darwin studies, look at the Dutch people. They built half of their country below sea level, 6 feet below sea level, and every Dutch person is like 6'6". Think about it. If the levee breaks, your ass is grass, you're going to drown. You have to be taller than 6 foot to survive when the levee breaks and it floods your country. Am I right? Is this an evolutionary adaptation?
It must be it. Yeah, it's so that we can look over the dike, right?
Yes, right.
6 foot below. So no, it's an interesting story about the Dutch, and we were not very tall during the medieval times. I mean, we were pretty average and pretty undernourished, like much of Europe at that time. But yeah,
everybody except for the people who lived in the castles, they ate pretty well.
They ate pretty well. That's right. That's right. So, but no, maybe it's because we like to consume dairy. We consume a lot of dairy.
There's no question. I think that the last numbers I looked at, there's about 2 million dairy cows in Holland, which is the Netherlands, a country about half the size of my home state of Indiana. There's 9 million milk cows in the entire United States of America. There's almost 2 million milk cows in Holland, which is half the size of Indiana. Those numbers are close to accurate, aren't they?
Yeah, I believe so. I've been gone for about 10, 11 years, so you might know them better than I do. But yes, growing up, there are dairy cows everywhere. I mean, we have green grass all year round typically.
So moving from dairy cows to beef, Kelly sends you these samples, and he's obviously wants to promote the idea that it's mostly out of an interest, but then also it's out of an interest and it's also out of a capitalistic interest. He's in the business of producing crops. He's also in the business of producing a crop called beef. And you did the analysis at your lab. What did you find?
Well, we found that for animals that were finished on feed, they looked very good. I mean, I was surprised to see the omega-63 ratio, and we can go into that. But it was on par with high-quality grass-fed beef. And then I learned from Kelly that they were not per se finished on grass, but were consuming feed. So that was
the omega-6 thing, because that's been touted by the grass people for quite some time. I don't know why that matters. I mean, I don't just, and I'm sure a lot of people are listening and watching this. Why do I care about a ratio from omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids? What does that mean to me?
Well, it's a good indicator of quality, we believe. So typically when an animal is fed out in a feedlot, it's really the omega-3s that go down. And so it has less omega-3s, and omega-3s are important for cardiovascular health, brain health. They have anti-diabetic effects, etc. I mean, overall general well-being. And we're not consuming much omega-3s in our diet within the U.S. I mean, and so what various studies have found, and what we have found as well, is that actually beef that is enriched in omega-3s, just by the sheer quantity of beef that we eat, can make a meaningful contribution to overall intakes. Now, I do want to highlight that, of course, something like salmon is a lot richer in omega-3 fatty acids, but the nature of it is that do people eat more beef or more salmon within the U.S. diet? And it is beef, right? So it's not to say you shouldn't eat salmon, but animal source foods from land animals, be it beef, pork, chicken, if those are richer in omega-3s, they can be an important source for humans, particularly the omega-3s that are already in what we call an animal form, because we're animals as well, right? Which would be the omega-3s, EPA, DHA, and DHA, EPA, and DPA. It's a lot of
you're getting a little professorial. What are those things?
Well, those are long-chain omega-3 fatty acids that are sort of animal omega-3 fatty acids. So we believe that those have the strongest health benefits because we're also animals ourselves.
So, Stephan, and most people that listen to this show are not going to be vegetarian or vegan, and so don't worry about offending them. Remember, they're half wacko anyhow, so that's fine. So here's what we really got to get into is on this omega-3 thing. Are you saying that most beef, the way it's been conventionally raised since the 1950s, really in the United States, in a feed yard situation, are high in omega-6 and almost no omega-3? Is that the issue?
Yeah, well, they're not even that high in omega-6. That's the sort of the misconception, because grass-fed beef is only slightly lower in omega-6s than grain-fed beef, but it's really the absence of omega-3s in the grain-fed beef that is, I think, an issue. So that lowers intake within the human population with already very low omega-3 intakes.
Okay, so Kelly's method of raising these animals isn't really all that disparate from the normal feed yard situation. They're on grass when they're cow-calf pairs. At some point, they get weaned. They might stay on grass in a backgrounding situation and take them up to, say, 800 pounds, 600, 700 pounds, whatever that number is, and then you put them on feed. Why is it different? Why are your ratios different? And we're going to get into the other stuff, vitamins, antioxidants, minerals, macro and micronutrients. We're into that. Why is yours different? You're not all that different from the feed yard that's over in Cumming County, Nebraska.
No, well, I would tell you that our ration isn't potentially quite as hot when we talk about mega cows and things like that. How much corn, like currently the cattle are eating 33 and a half pounds, 13 and a half of that is corn. There's another, say 16 pounds of that is silage. I would tell you then that probably 4 pounds of the silage you would consider corn. So overall, out of the 33 and a half pounds,
half of it's corn.
Half of it's corn. And in some rations, there would be a higher percentage of corn. The rest of the, so it's our silage, our corn, and there's some of our wheat straw in there. And, then the other ingredients would be purchased. But the ingredients that we raise and, working with Calibrated Agronomy, the agronomy company that we work with, we take what's called a SAP analysis.
Yep.
And we try very hard to achieve mineral balance. And then, of course, we're no-till with the Iowa soil, things like that. So we feel like we checked the box on biodiversity. Again, remember, nutrient density is biodiversity plus mineral balance. And so we're checking the box on the biodiversity with our farming practices, with our no-till farming practices. We're checking the other box on mineral balance with the SAP analysis. But we did that to try to raise better corn, and we stumbled upon this nutrient density thing, and it just fascinates me.
Yeah, it is fascinating because obviously you are what you eat. We've been hearing that our whole life. And I want to get into the actual, the lab analysis of the other stuff because it matters. Again, you can exist on all kinds of calories. You could eat just candy bars all day long and you would live at some point because your body can have those calories. You're going to be very, you're going to start to have muscle mass. You're going to have all these kinds of issues and health issues, et cetera. Before I get into going back to the vitamin mineral analysis from Stephan, I want to remind our listeners that with a new growing season underway, the superior nutrition from my friends at Redox Bionutrients makes a major difference come harvest time. Redox provides carefully sourced nutrients that are combined with biostimulants that have been proven winners since the Moon family. Darren Moon started his company 31 years ago. He was in specialty crop. He moved into turf, golf course, etc. Then he moved into increasingly broad acre. Listen, we're talking about products that can actually help you reduce synthetic inputs and not sacrifice yield or even increase yield. It's all about soil health. It's all about the future. Redox can help. They have a new product called DiCap. DiCap provides unequaled stress defense, increasing your plant respiration and your antioxidant production. We're going to be talking about antioxidants. It's also a fantastic source of potassium and phosphorus. You want to find out more about DiCap and the entire lineup from Redox, go to redoxgrows.com. That's redoxgrows.com. Tell me about the analysis, Stephan. Vitamins, minerals, et cetera, et cetera. The average consumer goes in and buys a steak. They don't have a clue. On average, we think it's got this many vitamins, minerals, et cetera, but it's not. All beef is not created equal.
No, all beef's not created equal. In fact, there's a huge variation. We did a big study together with the Bionutrient Institute called the Beef Nutrient Density Project, and we profiled about 450 steaks that were available commercially in North America. So we profiled a large part of the supply chain, and the variation was about 10x. So that tells you that
450 steaks, and the variation of nutrient component varied by 10 times.
Yeah,
10 times. Like one would have 5 milligrams of something, the other would have 50.
Yeah, in some cases, yeah, the vitamins were a little bit tighter, but on the antioxidant side and the fatty acid side, that was the finding for sure. And what was really interesting about that is that, and it tells you that grass-fed, grain-fed, it's we make that distinction within the paper that's about to come out on that this year. But what we found is that various grain-fed samples are better than grass-fed samples, but the best grass-fed samples were more nutrient-dense than the best grain-fed samples, if that makes sense. But it tells you that there's this huge variability. And when Kelly described also his finishing practices, feeding less corn, we have found that as well, that producers that care about the feed, right, produce healthier feed, that maybe have a little pull back on the corn a bit, the size may be more diverse, more nutrient dense, that those actually can be above many of the grass-fed samples as well. So that tells you that they're, the way you raise the food or finish the animal has a major impact on it.
There's no question, Kelly. We know that how you raise the animal. You've cracked on me about being a dairy farm kid, and we ate the, Holstein steers growing up, but they were also Holstein steers that were on grass, grain, and hay. And, so as opposed to some scrawny little thing, they had fat cover, et cetera, et cetera. But we didn't feed them thinking, we fed them thinking, let's get them to 1,400 pounds, or let's feed them to, we never fed them, just like everybody, we never fed them saying, let's feed them to where they nourish the Mason family better than the steaks at the Kroger. And that's the thing where we're going with this.
Yeah, we've never thought about that before. I've never thought about it before until we stumbled upon this.
Because we sell pounds, and you sell pounds, and that's what you think.
Yes, we sell pounds, and we're probably still going to continue to sell pounds. But if it creates a demand for my product, and I'm learning something along the way, why wouldn't you try to do this? Does it mean that we're going to raise our prices? Not necessarily. You're just trying to create demand for your product, And I just want to. It's fun to do the best job I can. It's fun to continue to learn and see what we can do, and it makes it taste better. Like we talk about. A lot of people are asking me about this. I'm like, if I can maintain or achieve that nutrient density, the product tastes better. It's much like a brick score in wine. This is my analogy. Let's see what Stephan thinks about this. If you go to a vineyard, you're at 1 to 5 in the afternoon, when the sun is out, the brick score, which is the measure of sugars moving in the plant, is going to be the highest it can. And that the farmer in that vineyard is going to be walking around with a refractometer. And when the brick score gets to a certain level, he knows that affects the taste of the grape. The higher the brick score, the better it's going to taste. And he will not harvest those grapes until they are at the highest that he feels he can achieve that bricks. And then he harvests them and captures those sugars in there that at dark are going to move back out of the plant. With nutrient density, we've essentially increased the brick score of the cattle. There is no such thing, but that's the analogy I would give you. And so we feel our products are healthier and we feel they taste better. That's what that's what the consumer wants. They want the best tasting product they can get. They might care about the health, Damian, but if it tastes good, they're going to buy it.
Stephan, the book Steak, written by Mark Schatzker, I've had him on the show way back when, and I read the book, and he equates flavor to nutrition, that as animals, you said, we're animals, we eat animals. If you put goats out in the pasture, they might go over and they may eat grass, then they'll go over and forage on something in the fence row because and they don't know. They didn't go to the doctor and say, you need more vitamin B6 or whatever. They do it because their body is craving that thing. We joke pregnant women craving salt or whatever. Well, there's a reason that happens. Cravings exist because do you think our bodies are smart enough to know if I put those 3 steaks out, 3 of the 450 you tested, one of them's Kelly Garrett's, one of them's the below average conventional that you just bought at a below average retail outlet, and one of them's a grass fed. Well, my body taste it and say, damn, that's good. But really my body's saying, I need what's in that steak.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, certainly we have those innate feelings as well. I don't know. We might have to starve you, Damian, for your body to tell you that.
It might be because then you'd be at a point where you're craving like you know that I need protein so badly or whatever that thing is.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the components. And I want to talk about the marketing after that, but about the components. You talk about vitamins. You saw less of a variation on vitamins from the crappiest steak to the better steak. And we're not even talking crappy prime to select. We're talking crappy in terms of nutrition. All the steaks you bought, presumably all the steaks you tested, Stephan, would have graded choice or something like that, right?
Yeah, that's right. Most of it. So in that study that we did, and what also is the benchmark with the data we provide for Kelly, is that, a lot of it was store-bought. indeed, in terms of the grain fed side. But we also had producers like Kelly. Kelly was a part of the study, but sending the samples later, is that people that were, we call it, I don't know, this is the term I sometimes use, a family feedlot or a smaller feedlot that uses more of an artisanal feedlot, as you can say, that uses better practices, feeds more nutrient dense feed. Those actually were a lot more nutrient dense than maybe the average steak that you buy at the grocery store. And to the point of taste as well. And this is something we also measured. You can taste these things for sure, especially within the phytochemicals, which is really a newer area of research that is enabled by further advancements in mass spec technology, which is being used. It's sometimes referred to as the dark matter of food, but that is phytochemicals. They also provide flavor. So they may have a hint of bitterness or sweetness or other or umami, or however you want to put this. But typically, when you have more of these phytochemicals that are transferred from the plant within the animal, it provides for a more complex flavor. So that's why it's this idea that nutrient density and flavor are very much related. And we don't really see a major difference within the vitamins, but that's also by design, right? Is that there's oftentimes fortification of vitamins within rations as well, or maybe a vitamin or mineral block, because that's so important for growth. But what you maybe are missing when you're feeding a high ration of corn that is maybe not the most nutrient dense corn is that you're missing out on all these phytochemicals, these other thousands of nutrients that we are discovering and are sometimes referred to as the dark matter of nutrition, which is the other 99.9% that does not appear on the nutrition facts panel. And really, if you can raise that, you get more flavor in, you raise the health of the animal, you raise the antioxidants, you raise in general, just a healthier food product.
Kelly, you're into this, and it starts with soil. You've been big on that with the extreme ag work we do, then the plant, and then to the feed. The thing is, the consumer will want this, but right now the consumer has no idea. Stephan just said they grabbed 450 samples, and there was as much as a 10 times variation in some of the measurable components of nutrition. Your customer, any customer, hell, you and I are in the business, and we don't know. We don't know how to. We can look at a steak and say that's a good looking steak. And our friend Tommy Roach, that judged meat for Texas Tech, would really know how to judge it. But they judge it for fat speckling and ribeye size and all those things.
Right.
We've never ever had, other than if it looked terrible, like we might think it's not. We have no way of knowing.
We don't.
We have very little way. I guess we have a marginal way. Like you and I can say that one probably is better than that.
We have an idea if it's going to be tender or not when we look at it, but we don't totally know. But we still don't know what the nutrition is,
right.
But that's why we need to put it on the label. That's the value of what Stephan is doing. Is we need to put it on. We need to put it on the label, and that's what we plan to do with our results.
So, Stephan, let's ask about that. First off, do you see a future where when I go to the store, the nutrient analysis is on that? Because now you're talking about it has to be analyzed on every steak. There's going to be a tremendous cost component to that. That's why it's not happened. Certainly, my goodness, the 4 big packers are going to resist the hell out of this. What's the future look like on this part of it? The stuff where you're in that lab doing this analysis and you can tell, but the consumer, and maybe the processor certainly doesn't even want to fool with it.
Well, I think the labeling does have a future on that. I mean, one low-hanging fruit, I think, right now is just to put an omega-3 content or an omega-6 to 3 ratio on packaging. And that is you have to apply for it, but it is allowed by FSIS. So it won't be on the black and white nutrition facts panel, but you can put it on the front of packaging. So that could be another way of doing that. I think that's a low-hanging fruit that I see.
Do I have to measure every single piece of meat that gets cut?
I mean, I don't know if you need to measure every single piece of meat that.
All right, every steer that goes through the National Beef Facility in Dodge City, Kansas, as soon as does somebody pull a sample from that 1,400, 1,500 pound steer right when it gets slaughtered and say, oh, here's the.
I plan to do it. I plan to do it, say, once a year or twice a year, because as I tweak my fertility in my corn, yep, or like some rye, triticale, as I tweak that fertility, that's what's going to make it change. I really don't know I don't think, Damian, that the nutrient density is going to change that much unless we change what we're feeding to the cattle or change the way. And the one question that I feel like I didn't answer you very good is, what is the difference? It's the sap analysis in my corn. Yep. And when we talk about the mineral balance, the mineral balance that we try to maintain out of this sap analysis is 95% assimilation of nitrogen. To me, that is the definition of mineral balance, and I get that from the sap. If you want to know what an average producer is, I'll pick on our friend Matt Miles. He was 68% in the first sample he sent in this year. So I'm trying to get to 95, and I struggle with all the nitrogen that's being released out of my corn. I'll be somewhere between 90 and 95. Matt was at 68. Matt shouldn't be embarrassed at that at all, because when I started, I was at 65 to 70. That's where the average producer is raising corn. So when I say that the grass is more nutrient dense, it kind of is. But when you go back to it, another question you asked Stephan, is the one that tastes better, more nutritious? I believe that it is. And the reason is, when the cow is going across the field and you got the multi-species, if you talk about a good grass-fed producer, and most of them are good producers or they wouldn't be in that.
Yeah, they don't have single species. They
have multiple species.
Ideally, your pasture has got some brome grass and orchard grass and some some what do they call them? Brassicas.
Brassicas. So
Brassicas.
As I've started to work with TJ and BioTill, TJ's like, watch the cattle go across that paddock. If they need micronutrients, they're going to take the brassicas, the kales, the cabbages. If they need protein, they're going to eat the grass. So is the grass more nutrient dense? I really don't know, because we haven't tested it for a sap analysis yet. But the cattle are selecting what they want to eat. When they go to the bunk, the only choice they have to eat is what we provide them.
Yeah,
and so now when the mineral balance of my corn being at that above 90%, hopefully above 95, that is the difference. And I believe, and my mineral content, if you look at the calcium, the magnesium, the vitamin B2 and 3, I was far above all of grass-fed and grain-fed in my samples. And I'll tell you, this is what the grass-fed people don't like, but we're force-feeding the cattle that, and I believe that's what the spike is. And again, when you talk about the cattle are selecting what tastes good to them because what they instinctively need, the steak that tastes good, you instinctively need.
Yep. I want to get into some of the analysis, and then also how we might in the future be able to better monitor this for the food. But I want to remind you, if you are listening to this, you are in the business of agriculture. And if you are in the business of agriculture, you might need money. And remember, funding your farm, ranch, or agribusiness does not have to be hard. You might have a bank. You might probably have several lenders. I've worked with ag lenders, and they're great folks. But you know what? You sometimes have needs that do not fit their template. That's where Harvest Returns can help you. Your operation's unique, so why should you try to fit a square peg in a round hole with one-size-fits-all ag credit? Harvest Returns can help. They understand that every agribusiness is different, with a pool of over 18,000 investors. Basically, what Harvest Returns did is they went and found a bunch of people with money and said, you know what, we're going to present you different types of agribusinesses, and they need financing that doesn't fit the conventional ag loan scenario. 18,000 investors can create financing options that work for you. Go to Harvest Returns to bring the capital you need to reach your goals. That's harvestreturns.com. Go to harvestreturns.com to learn more about how you can get started and grow your operation today. All this measurability, I'm going to run through a couple things, though. As excited as I am about it, what the hell is an antioxidant, and why do I need it?
Well, you need it because we have oxidative stress as part of our normal metabolism. And arguably, I would say you need it because these are the things we pull out of our diet. These things are rich, antioxidants are rich in fruits, vegetables, animal source foods that are nutrient dense, that are raised on biodiverse pastures or fed biodiverse feed, as such as Kelly indicates. And when we eat ultra-processed foods, which is what we're eating in very high quantities within our diet, but 2/3 of our calories come from ultra-processed foods, a lot of those antioxidants are being processed out. And the lack of antioxidants in our diet, I mean, it's multifaceted, but part of the reason is probably why we have such high rates of diseases that are rooted in oxidative stress and inflammation, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, etc.
So antioxidants help reduce inflammation. And a lot of the diseases we're talking about are inflammation either causing or the result of inflammation. Is that an accurate way to look at it?
That's an accurate statement, but it does not do justice to the antioxidants because, what various of these compounds do, they might help take up sugar from our blood into our muscles without the use of insulin. And that is a good thing. They might also act on the health of our liver, on our cognitive function. So not only we broadly call them antioxidants because all of them, not to go too deep into the chemistry, but the structure of their ring makes them an antioxidant. But they are also signaling molecules within our cells to typically lower our risk of cancer, lower our risk of heart disease, help our brain stay sharp. So, and then if we have more of these within our diet, that's a good thing. And this is both within animal source foods. What the interesting part about animal source foods is we're eating another animal, right? So we get antioxidants.
You brought this up multiple times. I don't know if you're trying to make us feel guilty that we're not vegan or if there's just something. What are you doing here? You said we're animals, we're eating other animals. Am I supposed to be bothered by this? Are you doing?
Oh, no, you should for yourself as an animal.
Are you secretly a PETA member? I'm worried about you.
No, my point is the point I'm trying to make is that, if you think about an animal, right, you're an animal yourself as well.
Right.
So if you raise your animals very healthy, the health of the animal is probably going to directly translate to your health as well. And what I would say by is that if we eat other animals, we get various of the compounds that are within the same form as our bodies. So that may have some benefits in the sense that they're already pre-processed and these antioxidants are in similar forms as us. Because this is one of the key points I try to make is that, we accept for ourselves that by the way that we feed ourselves has a major impact on our health.
Yep.
But sometimes when we look at animals, what you brought up earlier, we just look at it like pounds of weight, or they need more protein and things such as that. But then we're eating that animal that is not as nutrient dense, and then that obviously has an impact on us.
I agree with that we think about ourselves. We don't think about, obviously, we've been hearing forever, you are what you eat and all that kind of stuff. Real quickly, getting through some of the other testing, and then we'll get back to the business side of this and we'll wrap it. My minerals, did you see a big difference, zincs and coppers and those kinds of things, from a Kelly sample to a standard sample? Where the omega-6 to 3 is a big, huge variation. You said vitamins didn't vary that much.
The vitamins B2 and 3.
Go ahead, Kelly.
On Kelly samples, there was a good difference for sure. I mean, I was just talking about it more broad, and so I think, Kelly, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe your samples had more calcium and magnesium than the average grass-fed and grain-fed samples. I also think you had more vitamin B2, B3.
Okay.
So there was a difference in that. But when I was talking about there wasn't a large difference, I'm talking in general. When we compared grass-fed and grain-fed, there wasn't a huge difference on those 500 samples. There was still about a 3-4x variation. And Kelly samples, in this case, on the calcium magnesium, were certainly on the high side of things, which tells me that the crops that he's feeding, or the feed that he's feeding to the animals, is rich in these minerals.
Yeah, I was very interested in that. And I agree with him. Stephan is absolutely correct. In the vitamins and the minerals, your average grass-fed and grain-fed were very close. Where grass-fed is ahead of grain-fed is mostly in the omega-6 to 3 ratio. Mm-hmm. My GLC beef samples, we were fairly superior in the vitamin content and the minerals when we talk about calcium and magnesium. And calcium is something we work very hard on in our corn crop. What I found interesting, and I think there's a correlation, is our zinc was about average with grass and grain fed. And zinc is zinc and calcium are probably the two most difficult minerals that we deal with nutritionally in a corn crop. Zinc becomes tied up very easily in the soil. Yep. Every time we've never seen a sap sample that has enough zinc. It's always deficient. We're always adding it. And I think that carries through. What it tells me is, like, if we're going to correlate fertilizing crops to food, we probably need to push the zinc even harder than we are. The calcium, I feel like we're kind of doing a bang-up job when you look at the amount of it that was in the beef, because we pushed that very hard with the corn as well. I thought that was one of the most fascinating things to me, was what we look at agronomically, and then you see nutritionally in the beef with calcium and zinc.
Yeah, that's right. And one of the other things also is that indeed, as you mentioned, Kelly, that the grass-fed beef, typically the omega-6 to 3 ratio is improved by having more omega-3s, and then another area is indeed those secondary components, those antioxidants that are being pushed up. But that comes back to, if you have more antioxidants in your feed, you can raise that within the beef.
I think it's noteworthy, Damian, that my antioxidants, that was the one spot where the grass-fed was better than me. is the antioxidants. And then, like Stephan talks in there, that's kind of typical of fermented feed. So with the amount of silage that we're feeding, that I think that's probably predictable. We're raising some oats and peas this year. We're going to bale it, and then it won't be fermented feed. And I think, like in our ration, we probably need to up the corn a little bit, lower the silage a little bit, and add in these ground oats and peas. And I'm interested to see next year, will that antioxidant come up because we diminish the amount of fermented feed a little bit?
Yeah, and the thing is, you just added, like on the pea thing, you're adding a protein component to it. Does protein end up changing antioxidant? Then it becomes, because this is the next question. All right, what would be the impetus for, you are excited about it, and Stephan's excited about it, I'm excited about it, and I believe this is where the future of food and agriculture is going. Right now, the person listening to this, even though if you listen to the business of agriculture, you're forward thinking, you're educated about this, you're excited, but you're still going to hang up and say, yeah, but right now I still just get paid by the pound. And if I'm producing food for livestock, feed, crops, there's not right now. I mean, yeah, there's a premium to be made on higher protein wheat. But we're still not set up. Our infrastructure doesn't reward this, but it needs to.
Well, it doesn't. If you're going to sell into a packer and just sell the cattle, you're selling the commodity, just like we are on our corn. But in a direct-to-consumer business, some people are going to care about the health. Everybody cares about the taste. And when you achieve this, you're also producing a much better tasting product, in my opinion. I find it interesting, Damian. Stephan requires you send in 3 things, like 3 samples. So we had to send in 3 ribeyes, 3 pounds of hamburger, things like this. I really think he eats 1 and only tests 2.
Yeah, that's the truth of it. Now, what we do is we grind them all up. We quite defile the ribeyes because we grind them all up, mix it together, get an homogeneous sample. But it just comes back to the fact that you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket.
It comes back to the fact that who in the hell would grind up a good ribeye? I got a problem with this, Stephan.
Yeah, you do. Well, I can tell you what we do with it. We grind it up, then we powderize it on a liquid nitrogen, and we freeze dry it, and then we have ribeye powder. And that's what we're extracting. So, but yes, we have been known to occasionally have a big barbecue with the freezer leftovers and eat a bunch of ground ribeye.
That's what I would do too. So about the future, since you and I both, Kelly, think this is the future of food, and I want the professor to hop in here on this. How far away are we? How far away are we to where? Because 20 years ago, if you just said, hey, you're not going to need cable TV. There's going to be a day not that far from now where you just grab your device, whatever this thing is. Even 20 years ago, we didn't really have smartphones like we do now, and say, episode 31 of Gilligan's Island. You can basically say that. I want to watch episode 31 of Gilligan's Island where Ginger, falls in the lagoon. Boom. And it comes up. Where are we going to be on food where I say, I want a steak, and I want to know what it has in it, and it has, this, and this. Stephan talked about ultra-processed foods, term that's become more popular now with RFK, ultra-processed. But it didn't talk about the future where the reason we know the nutritional analysis, as shitty as it is, we know the nutritional analysis of a box of Oreos, right? But what we don't know is the nutritional analysis of a pound of hamburger at the meat counter or a pork chop or anything else.
Yeah, I think for the immediate future, it is just regular testing and then expanding the nutrition facts panel by putting some of those claims on there. I think that's the immediate future.
Will Big Food do it? Is Tyson going to do this?
Well, I mean, if right now it's the direct-to-consumer market, but you can see this being raised, right? If it comes from the consumer, if the consumer starts to demand it, and then maybe top-down policy at some point starts to encourage it as well, then maybe, yes, that would be the case, because I do have a feeling that bigger players are starting to pay attention to this, because the movement is just growing. I mean, consumers are more and more interested in where their food comes from, how it's grown, and what the healthfulness of that food is. But at the moment, I do think it's a sort of a bottom-up approach where this demand comes from the consumer and farmers such as Kelly that are like, hey, I think we're producing a more nutritious product. We want to prove this out and potentially command a premium for this.
Kelly, Henry Ford famously said, if I had asked the consumer what they wanted, they'd have said, I want a faster horse. Sometimes you have to be in front of the consumer and offer them something that they that they needed, but they didn't necessarily know they needed or articulate that they needed it. That's, I think, where this is. We're hearing about nutrient density. but the consumer still doesn't really know how to go about it. You and Carter and I talked about the financial opportunities. What's the business? Where's the business outcome of this?
To me, you have large retail brands now that are becoming vertically integrated, controlling the milk, controlling and I don't mean controlling, but they have control all the way through of what goes in their store, of the beef, of the milk, of the poultry, of the vegetables. Yep. And think of the marketing program. If you not only had the health benefits or the health metrics on the label, but how good it tastes. And if you get somebody to come in and try it and it tastes so good that they can't put it down, imagine the demand that you could create, the marketing program you could create. That's what I see coming.
Yeah.
Because everybody's trying to get a bigger percentage of the consumer market. This is how you do it.
Well, it's flavor, and remember on meat, it's tenderness and flavor. But then also now, I hope that everybody listening to this remembers one big thing: 450 samples that Stephan's lab did at Utah State University and found us great of a 10 times variation in actual nutritional component of the steaks. That is that's the takeaway for me. To say all steak isn't created equal, we're like, oh yeah, well this one's an old Guernsey dairy cow and it's kind of tough. No, it's not just that. It's way beyond the taste and flavor, taste and tenderness.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we were surprised too to see that the variation is so huge. But I do agree that, flavor and nutrient density, there's probably a relationship between the two for sure. I mean, coming back, and I'm going to offend ourselves one more time by saying we're animals. But the thing, though, is that these are things that we can taste, right? And we would have not been able to survive could we not pick this up through flavor, through sensing how we feel, right? Because now we run it through a mass spec and tell you the nutrients that it contains. But in the past, we didn't have that. But we had something else to go off of, which is flavor, and typically things that are flavorful, that have a deep complexity. They tend to be good for you. And I want to highlight one important thing is that, and I often talk about this in a presentation. It's from an explorer who traveled through the Great Plains 200 years ago, and what he mentioned was in his book is that what they did as the native peoples did, and that they mentioned that bison that was on a very diverse pasture was incredibly great tasting, and that they didn't need any vegetables with it, that they didn't need to fry it, or that when they just fry it or boil it, it tasted great, they needed no seasoning, and that in other times of the year it tasted terrible. Well, what were they tasting? They were probably tasting the nutrient density of those animals that were in really good shape, and that was that steak from that bison at that time tasted better than during another time of the year, because that bison was not as nutrient dense during that time of the year.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a deer hunter, you shoot a deer in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan where it eats pine cones. You eat a deer that's been eating corn, alfalfa, clover, grass, all the stuff around where I live here in Indiana, and it's a much different tasting deer. So it's a similar concept. Last question, Kelly, are farmers going to get paid for the nutrients of their grain based on it going to a feed, an animal feed ingredient list?
I believe it will be.
We're sure as hell not there now.
No, not there now. I believe it will be quite some time before we're doing that in mass. However, if you are connected to an end user,
yep,
I think that could come sooner. If you're connected to an end user that wants to produce beef to put in their store, I believe that could come sooner. Yes, that your product will be in higher demand because of what the end product will be done with it.
Well, and we saw it with organic. Like if you grow organic alfalfa and you're certified, then you can sell to like an organic beef, dairy, whatever, and then they can feed that. And so there is the trickle down and trickle back up of that. It's just that we're not there yet on nutrients, and it becomes, I think, about measurability. And you need labs like Stephan to say this that you fed from this made this result. So I think that's where it goes. His name's Kelly Garrett. He's part of Extreme Ag, and he's also a farmer. He's got a direct-to-consumer beef business. If you want to learn more about how to get this nutrient-dense beef from GLC Beef, where do they go, Kelly?
GLCbeef.com.
GLCbeef.com. We're joined by Stephan Van Vliet, my new favorite Utah State University professor. He's actually the only one I know. But anyway, I appreciate you being on here, Stephan. This is good stuff.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me, Damian, and for the opportunity.
I think we should visit this again in another year or two when we see, where we keep tweaking this and all that. If you enjoyed this show, please check out the show that I'm doing with people like Kelly and my friends at Extreme Ag. It's called The Granary. You can find it on YouTube. And while you're there, just go ahead and subscribe to my channel, the Damian Mason channel, and also hit subscribe for Extreme Ag, or go to extremeag.farm. And it's really cool. It doesn't cost you anything, but you can check out my show, The Granary. We've released 24 episodes by now, and it's a really, really cool show. And we just sit around talking about everything from the professional to the personal side of agriculture. Check out all the other great work we're doing at extremeag.farm, and also share this with somebody that can benefit from it. You know what? Been doing this for 8 years here in the business of agriculture, and we really appreciate it. We also appreciate our sponsors like Newfields Ag, got their hat right back here behind me, Harvest Returns, and our friends over at Redox. Till next time, thanks for being here. I'm Damian Mason, and this is the Business of Agriculture. This episode of the Business of Agriculture was brought to you by my friends at Newfields Ag. American made, American known, focusing on the success of the American farmer. That's Newfields Ag, offering a complete lineup of high-performing biological products for you, the American farmer. Visit newfieldsag.com for more.